Oh, internet, I'm proud to be back. I feel like hammered shit. Let's talk about the Onision documentary. Alright, so yeah, I know I'm a little late to this one, and to be honest, my opinions on it are pretty much, I don't know, milquetoast at best. Sorry guys, not gonna give this one the good old Shane Dawson treatment, but hell, why don't we break this down in the only way I know how, from a film student's perspective. So let me explain to you what the Onision documentary actually is, right? Because people wanted it to be the swan song to destroy him, or they're all rooting for it to be a horrendous disaster. And I guess if you're in one of those camps, you're gonna feel a certain way about this. But here's what I think the Onision documentary actually is. The Onision documentary is a documentary I put on really loud on my TV while I'm washing the dishes. That's it. The documentary is slow enough that I won't miss anything if I'm really focusing on the dish, but it also has enough bruh moments that when they say a wow word, I go, wow. Sounds like a bad guy. And then I just go back to doing what I'm doing. Now I understand all of us here on the internet have this weird encyclopedic knowledge. Hell, there is even an online encyclopedia that chronicles everything that Onision does. But let's be real here. In the grand scheme of the universe, Onision ain't even a blip on the radar. This doc isn't for the people with that encyclopedic knowledge. When I look at Discovery Plus, I realize who this documentary is for. It's for your boomer family. It's for people ages 40 to dead, right, who also really enjoy home and garden TV. Discovery Plus is for people who really enjoy day drinking wine while watching true crime shows that say nothing, do nothing, and are about 10 steps away from just becoming a PowerPoint presentation. In pitches for documentaries, if we want to sell something to a company like Discovery, right, what you do is you say, here's my documentary, here's what it is, right, and you'd say it like, you'd give like a log line, so a log line is this. So you'd give a log line, and then you'd say who the product is for. The Onision documentary is for ages 40 and up, people who are older and aren't really familiar with the internet, to get them interested in this character and this idea. It's really a win-win because the idea of the internet being a scary place is really topical right now with things like fake news and horror movies like Unfriended. So this will be a really great documentary because social media influencers are also on the up and up. And then that's how you pitch this kind of project, right? You pitch it in a way that'll make an executive who doesn't give a shit or know what the hell any of this is, the okay, right? That's what you want. And that is exactly what happened here. I've seen YouTubers like talk about how this documentary is excruciatingly surface level with it describing basic concepts of how YouTube works and all those other things. And you know, guys, seriously here, we're not the center of entertainment. I really think we might value ourselves a little too much in the grand scheme of things. We aren't that important. Granted, I will say that traditional media definitely does not like to play ball with us. They really don't, and they have different values compared to what the internet media has. And we'll get to the different games that people are playing on and on which different side they're on, because I know the world surrounding the documentary is much more chaotic and what people are drawn towards when they talk about this online, rather than the documentary itself. But right now, if you haven't noticed, I'm going to be tackling the documentary just on its own. So what about the documentary on its own? What about the Onision documentary? Well, aside from the fact that Discovery likes to claim videos, you know, it's about run-of-the-mill. I really don't know what else to say here. It's boring. It really is excruciatingly boring, and that's not even because I have an encyclopedic knowledge of Onision. It's just that it's boring. But let me explain something about documentaries as well. Documentaries, people seem to assume, are accurate depictions of reality. They are not. Documentaries are more or less how the filmmaker views the world or this certain subject. Usually, you know, it's a film at the end of the day, so they take creative liberties and structure things in a certain way for the narrative of the film. And they usually do this with the express intent of sending a message. That's really what documentaries are for. When I covered bronies, I wanted to tell people bronies aren't bad. This is what a brony is. So that's what I did, right? So let's say a documentarian is doing a documentary on climate change, right? They're going to present the idea of climate change in a different way from a documentarian who's doing a documentary on BP oil, right? Who was paid by BP oil to talk about why BP oil is a good company. Those two documentarians are going to have very different interpretations over what the truth is about climate change and, company ethics surrounding, the climate and environment. This isn't to say one is particularly right or wrong. These are just different perspectives, right? It's different biases that the documentarians are going into making their film, right? They're going from different perspectives and they have different facts that they use to prop up their argument and their story. And so, yeah, this is where we come to the first big bruh moment, right? Here's the thing, guys. Every documentarian, every person in media, everybody who works in entertainment has an agenda. They have a slant. They have an angle that they're going at it. I have an angle when I cover content online, when I cover drama, when I cover all this stuff online. I have a slant. I have a place where I'm coming from that defines my opinions and what those opinions are about. And so does Keemstar. Keemstar, you could think about his opinions, what he thinks of the world, and see how that is reflected in the news he reports on in his channel. I know it sounds like something that really shouldn't matter and that you should focus on reporting the news, but let's be real here, guys. Part of news is that it's voyeurism and entertainment, so it does end up having a slant at the end of the day, regardless of how serious the news is. Again, if it bleeds, it leads, and if it bleeds, it leads seems kind of very condensed to one specific type of media or like journalism. But in the context of this, it bleeds, it leads just means, if it gets dramas, it gets clicks, you could say it however you want. So what did I want out of an Onion docuseries? Well, I was going into it with the intention of being a person who is completely unfamiliar with Onision. I figured after skimming Discovery Plus that I should be going at it from the idea that, okay, if I wanted to convince a boomer family member that Onision is bad, this is why you should care about the thing I care about, I'd put this in front of them and I'd be like, here, this is why Onision's bad. Because a lot of the YouTube videos require outside knowledge, right? It's really hard for somebody new to jump in on this and understand a lot of what's going on. And a lot of people do understand what's going on, but there is a lot of legwork that's involved with somebody trying to understand something, especially going through YouTube. You probably have to watch a couple of videos, but in this one, you just put one video in front of them and you're like, this is what it is. So that's my thesis. Does the documentary say Onision bad? Do they do a good job of that? If they can do that, then they've basically made all they need to do in their documentary. Some documentaries fail at presenting a message, others fail at presenting a narrative, and this one really fails at presenting a narrative. And also, I personally didn't find it super convincing, but I heard through anecdotal evidence of people in public that yes, Onision bad, and we're talking like people who are professionals in business, not weirdos on YouTube. If some random old lady is like, yeah, I think this Onision guy needs to go to jail, then you could bet that I guess it did its job. So there's really no hook to carry this documentary. I think one of the worst things a documentary could do is just talk to you about how bad a thing is or not show it. I think one of the reasons I really like a documentary like Grizzly Man is because they have all this footage of Timothy Treadwell, and I think if you just watch the footage on its own, you could come to a lot of the conclusions that Werner Herzog came to in the documentary. There's a lot there and a lot to unpack. But Onision documentary, you can really tell the documentary was harmed by a couple of things. First, coronavirus. And by the way, if your documentary is going to be harmed because of the coronavirus, just don't make it. Just don't make it right now. Put it on the back burner. They already got the rights to it. I don't know what to tell you. And yeah, Chris Hansen showing up might make your ears perk up if you're in that age range that would remember Chris Hansen but doesn't use the internet. But the thing is that Chris Hansen, one, comes in too late, and then two, if you look at it from, the surrounding media online and talk about Chris Hansen, boy does it make him look bad. So the Onision docuseries starts with Onision giving a monologue, and I'm gonna skip the monologue because it's just Greg being himself, and it's boring and doesn't need to be there. I don't know why it's here. It feels like it's padding out the runtime. There's a lot of this documentary that feels like that, and people got really angry about this, but it's really hard for me to get angry about something that's so incredibly boring. Anyway, the monologue just shows him pulling his usual shenanigans. You know how it is. It's an incredibly boring intro, all in all, to the documentary. There's no pull-through or emotional hook, you know, no character. It's just voiceover. And since we're assuming the audience knows absolutely nothing about Onision, these characters that are doing voiceover right now at the beginning of the doc mean absolutely nothing. If you don't know who a Repsion is, you're just like, a Repsi what? Who's he who? Who cares? I don't know who that is. And if you don't know who that is, what they're saying means absolutely nothing because you don't know anything about Onision anyway. Ultimately, people saying Onision's bad devalues the weight that those videos of Onision would carry. If you just showed videos or clips of Onision being bad, it would have been, you know, like, let's say you just couple what the people are saying with clips of Onision, you know, being abusive on camera or being awful on camera, and you instantly create this visual connection in a person's subconscious where this guy does a bad thing, and then they show the bad thing, and then you're like, oh, he's a bad guy, does bad things. And you're like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on now. You know, I understand this guy needs to be stopped. You know, say what you will about Tiger King, because it really borders on reality TV voyeurism, but the intro to that doc sets up all the questions, all the characters, all the emotional stakes, all the drama in the start. Oh, who's Joe Exotic? He's a guy that owns big cats. Big cat people are crazy. Joe Exotic's in prison. Why is he in prison? What did he do wrong? What is wrong with these people? Why are these people in a cult? What is this going on? You know, you have all these questions, and part of what makes you start to ask those questions is that you see stuff visually, so you want to make connections for why this stuff is happening visually. But in the Onision documentary, it's just like a neon-colored room or stock footage of a computer in some minimalist office space. I don't know, I guess they had the office at a different time from Matt Diavella's documentary, and so they just were like, point the camera at the computer. And so that's what the documentary was. It absolutely blows my mind that Discovery Plus bungled the opportunity for extreme spectacle, right? Guys, I understand that it might be a little socially irresponsible to turn Onision into, you know, some crazy spectacle for, you know, your boomer family to sit down and watch the same way you did with Tiger King. But let's be real here. The guy is outrageous enough to carry that, right? I would agree, right? You know, Onision's a compelling villain, and I understand that that might feed his ego, but let's be real. There's thousands of videos on the internet already bashing the guy, and there's definitely a community of people who just want to see content of him being destroyed. It makes no sense why a bunch of executives wouldn't capitalize on all that feverish hatred in order to make a quick buck in a documentary. Or better yet, somebody takes the ideas and destructive, awful personality of Onision and just throws it into like a fiction or like a true crime fiction series. Because it would carry, I think it would. I think 30 years from now when Onision finally, you know, drops dead, assuming he drops dead early, I guess, I don't know. But assuming that all happens, right? I could totally see somebody going, I'm going to make a movie about that, and I'm going to make him a murderer. And then everybody on Netflix is going to watch it and love it, and they're going to be like, wow, I can't believe a guy like that exists. But instead, they made the most boring thing ever. It's so boring. It's so incredibly boring. I seriously was sitting down to watch this and going, how many more minutes are left in this? And then I saw there was 15 more minutes left in the episode, followed by 2 more episodes of equal length. Man, if that isn't discouraging. But I watched them all. And honestly, I think this just goes to show that YouTube and streaming services are different things. And you might be thinking, well, I could watch content on demand whenever I want, right? So they're kind of the same thing. No. YouTube content tells a story very differently than how, you know, content on a streaming service tells its stories, right? They've tried to present Onision in a format that is, you know, applicable to a streaming platform, but I don't think the story of Onision is best told through a streaming platform. I think if you just got a playlist of videos talking about how bad Onision is on YouTube, you'd get a more compelling narrative than you would if you sat down and watched this fucking documentary. I don't know, the weaving web of narratives that happen on YouTube just create a more compelling atmosphere of, you know, real world content kind of stuff. That's just me. I just really think that there's a time and a place for online stories like Onision to be told, but I don't think it's there. I don't think it's Discovery Plus. So let's talk about our boy Chris Hansen. So this documentary gives a lot of weird credit to Chris Hansen, which, like I said, documentaries aren't accurate depictions of reality, but considering Chris Hansen has revitalized his career with Discovery Plus, I can't help but think that Chris Hansen had a hand in the production. Not saying he did, just my opinion, but boy, if it doesn't look like that. Let's see, there's also the other journalist who worked for Newsweek. I don't believe he works for them anymore, but his name's like Steven Arashk, or Arshk. Anyway, he says some dumb stuff in the first episode, and he looks like he ran a 5K. I just couldn't get over the fact of how hot he looked. Not hot as in like damn sexy, I mean like somebody fucking put a fan on him. The dude looks sweaty as hell. I think Edwin got a lot of shit for also being in this documentary, and I understand where a lot of people are coming from. I will say though that at least when I'm doing a documentary like or something separate to like traditional YouTube stuff, I would also take quotes that are juicy, and it definitely doesn't help the person I'm interviewing, but they signed the release and I have it, so, and it's kind of shit to think about it that way, and that's kind of where the differences in ethical morality comes into, you know, conflict there. So I get why people are mad at Edwin. I also understand why Edwin feels very wronged, but honestly, I don't really think he did that bad of a job in it, in the grand scheme of things. I think we're really splitting hairs if we're gonna be like, Edwin, we're pointing the finger at you. Because I really don't think he's the one you should point the finger at, especially for this one. I think you should really point it at the production house. But then at the end of the day, again, this documentary really means nothing in, like, I look at how many videos are out there on Onision and how many of them are like poorly done or poorly researched or just poorly done in general. But this is the one we're gonna say, oh yeah, I don't like this one. It's like, guys, when was the last time traditional media has covered anything on the internet accurately? Have you guys seen Wall Street Bets lately? Man, I picked a great time to go on break, right, guys? You know, death. What a great time. But, you know, it should be pretty obvious that traditional media has different ways of doing things and clearly not enough time to research certain things. Also, it's not like anybody needs their validation to, like, stop Onision or anything like that. You know, if anybody, like, thinks you need that, I mean, you really shouldn't. So the Onision documentary, I mean, I could honestly go into depth about the episodes, but even though I wrote this script right after I watched all the episodes, I gotta be honest, 2 weeks out from that, I don't remember a single fucking thing about it. So that just goes to show you how unmemorable it is. I really think the Onision documentary will be relegated to the footnotes of the Onision saga. No one will remember it. It didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and it's incredibly boring, okay? It's less that the thing is awful and more that the thing is very one note, didn't need to be made, and has been made in better ways other places, you know? It really doesn't need to exist. It didn't need to exist in the first place, and I think really at the end of the day, this is ruining what would have been a much more interesting documentary or a much more interesting like Netflix series in the future. And it really helps sow the seeds for why traditional media and internet media kind of hate each other. And honestly, I don't care about this documentary. I think a lot of people would want me to be super heated about it, and I definitely have trashed it here, but it's very middle of the road, I think, and that if I tried to sit here and yell and prattle on about how awful it is, I'd really be doing you a disservice. The thing is boring. It's really fucking boring. Like, if you think it's gonna do anything, or that any of the it matters? Dude, come on. Anyway, let's go on to talking about the world surrounding the documentary. Also, documentary rating 4 out of 10. There we go. I almost forgot to give the number. So let's talk about investigative reporting decorum and, documentary production, right? Because we've talked about that a little. So, not all the victims of Onision consented to having their stories told in the documentary. And look, I get it. I'm a YouTuber, so what I say has different weight than traditional media, but I've done a little bit of the traditional media shtick as well as the traditional film shtick, and it's a totally different world. Like, if you are in traditional media and, you want to report on something and you get the go-ahead, you can report on. If it's public information, free game. That's really it. As long as you get the scoop, you got the scoop. That's what's important. In YouTube, there's much more of a moral, conflict that goes on, and I don't know if this is self-perpetuated by the commentary community or if this comes from the outside, internet culture and how it operates. But if you have public information out there or you've told your story in the past publicly, traditional media will just go, I'm a report on that. I can report on that. I have all right to because you posted it publicly. You can't take it down. It's the internet. However, YouTubers will have much more to lose if they go and report on your dirty laundry despite you saying, I don't want my dirty laundry to be reported on. And then if I report on it, everybody will rip me to shreds. So a YouTuber is more likely to give up a scoop to protect their own reputation, which has good and bad things, right? But really, this is just an offshoot of independent journalism, right? Independent journalism is going to be solely based on your reputation, so if you fuck it, you're out of the job. That's it. We play a different game, and I really mean that. We run by different codes. I've dropped huge career-making stories, what I think are huge career-making stories, right? Because sources say no, or they back out, or they won't be on the record, which is a really big one. A lot of people don't want to go on a record to talk about an issue that, they feel passionate about. If everyone is anonymous in your reporting, unless you're accredited or work at a good publication, you're lying. That's just it. The New York Times can report on something Donald Trump did using nothing but anonymous sources. But if I do that, I'm lying. That's just how it is. That's the difference in how it goes. I need somebody to be public in order to, satisfy people who don't agree with the story that I'm reporting on. I mean, as a journalist, you can take this tip to the bank and store it away forever, but you don't burn your sources. So I usually don't report on stuff unless people give me the go-ahead. Or unless it's some dumb drama nobody gives a shit about anyway. That's the reason most of my content is based more around that than anything else, especially since I reported on Social Repose 2 years ago now, because it's just not worth it. And by the way, you don't burn your sources definitely goes double for people who are criminals. At a publication, you can kind of get away with burning your sources even if they're criminals. But here's the thing, you can get a free bulletproof vest if you're a crime reporter or you work in a very super dangerous field. But I can't. I have to pay for that myself. By the way, they're very expensive. So if I burn a source and I work at a publication, I won't lose my job. Also, surprise, surprise, I burn a source or report on something, that other person can make a video responding to it and try to ruin my career or whatever, and there'll be a huge back and forth and discourse online. But in traditional media, it's out there, it's done, and then the other publications aren't going to report on how you did a bad job on reporting because you guys all talk to each other anyway. Rarely if ever will the New York Times do a hit piece on Forbes and vice versa. Really, at the end of the day, they're on the same team. Even better, want to hear the big secret here? Did you know that most people that work at political publications maybe, just maybe, aren't the political party they say they are? Yeah, weird. It's almost like you can write from the perspective of somebody you don't agree as to placate to the people you don't agree with. It's work. You write how your audience wants. You know how many liberal people work at Fox News? Pfft. You know where Fox News is? New York City. Of course liberals work there. All of this is to say that I get the mentality of where the journalists who made this documentary are coming from when they report on an Onision victim story who had a story out there publicly. And my personal opinion is, if it is out there publicly, then it's free game, right? But I understand why people would be irritated with them reporting on this after the person said, I don't want my story reported on. I don't want this in there. I don't want to be a part of it. You know, I get where both sides are coming from. I know it's harder to wrap your head around traditional media going against somebody's wishes like this, but that's where they're coming from, right? It's out there publicly. You know, somebody's going to report on it if I don't, so I might as well report on it. Better me than somebody else. I'll also say that most people watching this will watch the Onision documentary and not think anything about the people who weren't identified as victims of Onision in the Onision documentary. They're going to watch it as voyeurs entertainment and then go on with their day and go, yeah, Onision guy's bad. They won't need the validation of, who was this person? I don't know who they are, so I don't believe this. They're just going to believe it because it was on Discovery Plus, and we all know that they would never lie to us. Look, I understand that it's a really hot take and that people can disagree with me if they want, and I'm fine with that, right? But my personal take is, if it's public knowledge, it's fair game. But if you are privy to something new and unknown, you gotta clear it with your source because you don't want to burn your source. And that's really just where it is when you work with reputation alone. If you ruin your reputation, you ruin your chances in this job. That's just it. I will say though, people who went back on their word and were involved in the documentary, you know, and told other people's stories are personally responsible for telling those stories and either need to apologize or just say, yeah, I did it and I wronged you and I'm not taking it back. Because it seems like they're taking the middle road and not doing either. But I haven't been on Twitter that much, so maybe I missed something. Again, like I said, I've been away for a death in the family. Though I think we can all agree that it's kind of shitty on the person who went back on their word. They shouldn't have done that. There was no reason to do that. Either that or they just shouldn't have said it in the first place. Okay, so closing statements on the Onision documentary and all this. As a lover of documentaries, this is a boring fucking documentary. Guys, I really love documentaries. So like when I get angry about Shane Dawson and then him like trying to present his shitty vlogs as documentaries, I get annoyed because I love documentaries. That's my favorite part of filmmaking. That's my favorite genre, right? Followed by like, you know, dramas. But seriously, with how many hours of Onision related content is on the internet, this is like a drop in the bucket. And honestly, who fucking cares? Who really cares about this documentary? I think, what, 3 weeks out now? I think we can all say it's kind of a waste of fucking time. I feel like there definitely is part of me that wants to sit around and destroy this documentary on every fundamental level because that's what people professionally expect of me. I kind of feel like that's the case, but I know that I really shouldn't report or like make videos in that kind of fashion because it's not really doing anybody a good service. I think if we've learned anything from the Onision documentary, and I spent a long time after my grandmother passed, I spent a long time thinking about this, but it's very clear that YouTube much rather play ball with traditional media than consider YouTubers reporting on the conduct of other YouTubers to make legislative action on their platform. You know, it's clear to say that YouTube not only doesn't care, they've never cared, and that who they care about and the opinions of the people they care about are not you or me, right? Because we're not the people who are reading the New York Times. We're not the people who are watching Discovery Plus. The people who are reading and watching those things have a little bit more power in terms of like media entertainment and talk in like public rather than you or I sitting on YouTube. And that's kind of the worst part of this, and the only part of it that I think I could agree with pretty much everybody in saying, hey, not only does YouTube not care, YouTube never cared, and you're not part of the club that gets to make decisions on what matters. It's really and truly horrible that after all this time, all it took was brick and mortar media stepping in to finally do something about Onision. Seriously, it blows my mind that me, with all the subscribers and hemorrhaging subscriber count on my channel, right, that my count and my viewership is worth less than some C+ intelligence blogger on a site that nobody reads. Literally, you could be a YouTuber with 1 million+ subscribers and you still would not matter as much as that guy who we can't remember the name of, who wrote an article about Onision one time. Literally, the stuff with the Onision documentary was one of those times where I noticed that there is that collective unwritten agreement between corporations to all be on each other's side when the time comes. You know, it really goes to show you that if some independent YouTuber makes a video on something and then an article writer at some blog writes something, that article writer at the blog is the person who mattered because, oh, well, you know, that writer is a professional and not some kid in their room. You know, it really tells me that you need to stop giving the keys to the people on the internet that don't want to solve the problems, but they just want to have the keys to lock away everyone else from being somebody who can solve a problem. YouTubers are viewed differently than traditional media, and that's gonna stay forever, it seems like, and the divide is just gonna increase. So pick who you want to trust. Oh, and last thing, I swear, but you think Discovery Plus bungling the Onision story was bad? Just you wait until more corporate-owned YouTubers start showing up on the platform. People always wonder why I'm defensive over traditional celebrities or, you know, late night hosts having a spot on YouTube and getting promoted for being here. Well, here's why. Because if these corporate players are all the way at the top, and they're the ones who get to decide what goes on, and they're the ones whose opinions really matter, what's gonna happen to people like me? What's gonna happen to people like PewDiePie? What's gonna happen to people like Critical? What's gonna happen to all these other YouTubers with lots of subscribers but aren't part of the traditional entertainment circuit? Listen, Japan's VTuber market is pretty much completely dominated by people who are owned by companies. You think that's gonna be the end of it? Just wait until the day that we have a very successful corporate-owned commentary channel. I'm sure that's not gonna be a problem. Really, that's what Discovery Plus does for me. That's what I see when I look at the Onision documentary. I see a window into a future of people who are much worse at their job than regular commentary channels, trying to make commentary content and making the situations worse than they needed to be in the first place. Anyway, yeah, that's the Onision doc. I feel like I'm saying something completely irrational by saying this documentary is boring, not bad. But when I think of something bad, I think of something completely different, you know? So that's just me. I don't know. Maybe my tastes are just different or not aligned. I feel like I'm just gonna get a lot of shit for this video. Whatever. I don't know. But here's the thing. Guys, I've been away for like 3 fucking weeks now. I know some of you saw my post, but for those of you that didn't, and those of you that stuck around or came back, because taking time off like that at a channel my size is actually extremely detrimental to the health of my channel, and is equally bad for my mental health at the end of the day, because it's just another thing to compound on that. So I lost my grandmother recently. I was pretty much raised by my mom and my grandmother. My dad was around, but he worked so hard that I never really saw him that much. But I was pretty much raised by my grandmother. I spent a lot of time with her in my youth. And she passed recently, and that's been incredibly rough. So I've been taking a step away from YouTube and making content, really just to help move her furniture and stuff out of her apartment, and, you know, help my family with all the stuff that they need help with. And this is the first weekend I've had to myself that I haven't had to do something to help the family. So I personally really haven't had time to sit with it and kind of grieve. I mean, I have, but not in a way that I would like. But I physically can't not make more content now because it's been so long. Anyway, yeah, I really didn't want to come back and make this video because I just didn't want to do something so serious, but I just felt like it was sitting there on my shoulders like a weight, and I needed to just fucking put it out there. Anyway, guys, take care, be safe, be healthy. Go give your fucking parents and your grandparents a kiss. You tell them you love them, do all that shit, you know, because if you think you've done it enough, just do it again. right? Because you're just gonna feel good about it. Just do it because you can. Anyway, guys, yeah, that's where I am right now. But take care.
Wonder if all my bad decisions get accounted in the algorithms. No statistician could dissuade me from my bigger vision. I know my occupation's quite an unlikely place in this world to occupy and talk about upon a daily basis. Our information's predetermined by some biased business. We all in sermon to Silicon that push out lovely neighbors. I'm done with paper chasing, think I'm on to bigger banquets. This that full circle, new wave, energy.